welcome to the December 12th, 2024 FIC meeting.
Sorry,
We can
No problem.
open the meeting and start with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
How was everybody's turkey day?
Excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had a 27-pound bird for 12 people showing up. We had a ton of leftovers.
That's a lot of sushi.
There's a lot of turkey sandwiches. So there is an amendment to the agenda that I sent out 2 nights ago, one night, I forget when I sent it out. But we are going to open this with, Ron would like to bring up the August 8th revised memo of the immediate things that we could do with GMS. So one of them being the 3A, the other one being alarming the doors and that stuff. We did vote back on October 22nd that we would go into it in depth at some point. So the question is, do we want to bring that up now and vote on that now to go through it? Or do we want to, again, still hold the vote, but go into like the January meeting or something like that? So I would say,
Well, let me just go over why I think we need to talk about it now. The reason being is, my recommendations have been on our, what is it, the parking lot? Is that what did you call it?
yeah, and we brought it out and to vote on it back on the 22nd that we didn't want to bring it up, but then.
But we never have acted on it, taken
Right,
any
but
action.
then, okay, so to answer that, Ron, after the 22nd, the next meeting was immediately following the November
Okay.
elections. And then we canceled the one just before Thanksgiving.
Understand? I'm not, the point being is, we're gonna get wrapped up around the axle immediately in survey and on-site inside and everything else. The recommendations I have here, presented back in July, are what I believe legitimate means to mitigate the safety issues regarding 3A at GMS. And even if a new school was considered in any shape, form, or manner, it would be 3 to 4 years before you would see that. So, if we really do believe as a committee that the issues of 3A are truly safety, we need to be acting upon them now. The items I propose in here total, if you did all of them, it's 130. But my recommendation is to do everything except for the Jersey barriers. I added Jersey barriers at the request or suggestion of Dan after the first discussion. My recommendation would be not do the Jersey barriers, do everything, for a total cost of $74,000 for items. It's cheap money, it's in our budget now, we can take it out of the capital reserve, we can move forward on it immediately. Yes,
I'm going to suggest we table it to after we hear about the inside on-site meeting. I think there'll be a lot of things that are brought out, and I think we have to prioritize them both financially and time-wise. And I think to talk about any of them before the inside on-site study is reviewed is premature.
Okay? Anybody else?
I don't know if it's appropriate, but in consideration of the fencing option to address that aspect of the proximity to 3A, I have been researching another option, and I believe that we may be able to solve that issue of safety another way, which is, I would say, aesthetically more pleasing and also places more control within the building as opposed to the exterior. I'd be happy to bring it up now, but that would kind of elicit a discussion, which we haven't decided whether or not. But I do kind of, I don't want to call it a counter, but in recognizing that feature of the safety and the proximity to 3A, I have an alternative. But I don't know if that's actually the function of this committee, or rather to bring through the school board to then elicit the use of the funds within the trust fund to address the issue that we hoped to resolve with the fencing suggestion.
with what?
The fencing suggestion.
Fencing.
I mean, I think I'm with Denise, like, I think we need to figure out our path forward before we start making decisions on individual items, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that could be fixed. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be addressed. Whether or not we do one thing over another is yet to be seen based off the path we're gonna choose to go forward with our recommendation
Yeah.
to the school board.
Yeah, just adding that, I don't think that that's part of our function, is to look at those little individual quick things. That's something that goes via Dan or Brian through the school board, and you say, okay, we'd like to do that. That's not a function of what we're meant to be doing here, as
I
far
would
as I
disagree with you
understand.
there. The Facilities Improvement Committee is for all facilities, and that would be part
I
of it.
understand
So
that, but
I think
we-
the timing of it is, we can talk about the timing of it. I think it's a very valid point that you make, Ron, that it's gonna, if we decided to have a new school today,
Yeah,
it would still be 3 or 4 years, those problems are still gonna be there, and if they
Right.
are that big, a larger problem, it's something that needs to be discussed.
and that makes sense, but from what I heard from you and Matt is that the school board has asked the committee to focus on the bigger picture, the survey, to find out that.
Right, the school board is definitely looking for survey, feedback on the survey, because we have to just talk about, if there's gonna be warrant articles
Right.
really in the next
So I
few
think
weeks.
that's much more important than,
So I don't disagree with you, but I don't want to diminish what the work that Ron has put in and the importance.
no, I just wonder if there's a better way to present that.
No, I definitely agree that it's, part of this job is to start prioritizing projects at some point, but I think we need to get to our overall decision on what the next larger step is, and then if it is 3 or 4 years, based on whatever we do, yes, we gotta decide, we gotta fix the heating system, we gotta fix safety issues, what do we gotta fix now? You also don't wanna throw good money after bad, right? Like, if we're gonna end up replacing something a year from now, we don't wanna have to spend money on it today necessarily,
Yeah, so,
unless we're gonna find the right way to mitigate whatever the issue may be.
so,
Can I offer a suggestion based on if Dan has some suggestions that is it imminent, that you can share them? What your thoughts are?
What I offer as an alternative solution to the fencing option?
Yes. Are you prepared to talk about it?
Not with, and specifically in terms of pricing, where it compares, but the solution that I would suggest is delayed egress push bars on exterior doors for the school.
Okay, all right, so what I would recommend then is we'll go through the agenda with the understanding, we'll come back to this at the next meeting and have a specific agenda item at the next meeting.
If it's preferred, at the next meeting, I'm prepared to present the educational, I can wrap that all into, even though I was focusing on the educational things,
Okay.
I can actually wrap that in. I may be able to do some research to get closer to a price. I've done some research, I just don't want to quote a specific price. 'Cause
Yeah, of course.
The price I have for a product, and we would need it specified so that you could have badge override, fire, alarm system override, things like that. So I don't know the exact installation, but I can get close to a ballpark.
that's
of
fine.
what it's looking.
Aren't you gonna talk about the results and interpretation of the study next
Yeah.
meeting?
So that's what I wanted to clarify. By next meeting, do we mean next week or the
Yes.
first January meeting?
Next
I think
week.
it'd be better for the first January meeting, because
That-
everybody
so-
is leaving early tonight based off what I just heard.
right,
So,
so that
we're not
was
gonna get
gonna
through much
be,
today.
so that was gonna be my suggestion, right, is we already have Dan on the docket to talk about his educational stuff for next meeting. So if you wanna wrap in the delayed push bars, and that stuff, Ron, to discuss to bring that up. What I was gonna say is I was gonna make a motion that we would bring it up in the first scheduled meeting of January, because then we would have the survey results, the on-site insight report, and most of the school, you guys will be through budget season at that point.
It never ends, but yeah.
So the
Starting the next year's
official,
budget.
But cut to the chase, I'll concede to that.
okay, thank you. So let me just jot down that note, since Jen's not here to take minutes again. Bring up in
Mr. Chair, before conversation, I just have one point of order. As the holder of the paper surveys, I have no problem holding them, but at some point, either tonight or at a future meeting, if the committee could come up with a decision on what we're doing with the paper completed surveys, how long we plan on holding them, and then what's our plan for destroying them. I have no problem keeping them secured on the facility, but at some point, I just wanna know. I don't wanna make the unilateral decision of what we're doing with the paper copies,
I
so.
would say after we sort of thoroughly reviewed the survey, at that point, I mean, we can, in theory, we can keep it forever in case anybody wants.
Yeah, I would just rather a committee make the decision, and then I'll follow that.
Yeah, because
Put them in Rich's barn.
Because the other thing is, right, is we use the Google Forms to our advantage, is that Joe imported all of those
Yeah.
using the Google Forms. So we have the raw inputs already as Google, in the Google Sheets, so the question is, do we need to keep the paper? I don't know if there's a paper retention or a document retention policy that says that we have to. I know my company does, but that's ridiculous, and we have
Like I
thousands
said,
of
just
paper.
because we're at times of the essence, it could be a future meeting, I will hold them and keep them secure until then, but I'm not gonna do anything with them except keep them secure in my office until the committee makes a decision.
Sounds good.
The only reason you would ever need to keep them is if someone wanted to check my import.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah.
If you wanna rifle through all those, by all means.
So I would say Matt's not here yet for the school board updates. Do we just want to jump directly into anything dealing with the on-site insight? I know I sent out the link to the GMS one. I didn't know if there was, I had a couple questions. Do we have a date as to when they're going to present to the school board?
We're working with not Tina Harrison on the board, Tina who did the reports.
Yep.
With her schedule, to figure out something that works for the board, that we can invite this committee to, so we can all do it at one time.
Okay, so that's still,
I mean, I would imagine at
process.
this point, it's in January, like it's not gonna
Yep.
be next week at this point, so. But once we have that date squared away, that works with everyone's schedules with the board, we'll invite that to this committee, who are welcome to join us. And frankly, at that point, probably anyone who wants to sit in and listen, so.
Will she be here in person?
Yep, that's what we're trying to iron out, is here in person.
so that kind of went through those. With the short time schedule, do we want to open up the report? Has anyone, I mean, I read through, the GMS report extensively. Did we want to go through it, or is it?
All three were sent out?
Yep, so all three were sent out. I only linked the one for GMS since that's what we were tasked to focus with right now. But I guess the question is, did we want to do that now, or did we want to skip ahead? Because it sounds like most of the people have to leave by like 6:45 to get to budget meeting.
I can give you a quick synopsis of all three of them.
Yep.
Go for it.
Okay. Pass those around, please. And I'm just trying to figure out how to do this the most succinctly, but, I'll wait till that all gets passed around, it's important to see.
You start, I can
Yeah,
follow
I would
along.
say you can start.
Okay,
Yes, it's.
essentially what this spreadsheet is, if you remember, we talked extensively about the Turner report, and the left-hand side of it essentially is a spreadsheet that I had sent out previously that analyzes the Turner report. And then what I added to it is, on the right-hand side is the summation of the on-site insight report and compared the two. Startlingly enough, they are nearly identical in cost and scope. And I'll explain it to you in more detail. Let me begin by just highlighting what is on the left-hand side regarding the Turner report. As you see in the left-hand column, there is CHS, LMS, GMS. And if you remember, this was done in 2017, and the breakdown is shown there for each one of the schools, the major functions between civil, architectural, plumbing, and electrical. And to bring them into 2024 dollars, I used the Federal Reserve index, index to June of this year, and then the total dollars are shown for Campbell High School at $1,910,000, LMS, $4,060,000, GMS, $3,541,915. Included in that amount was installation of sprinkler system. So deducting the amount of the sprinkler system, just to the right of that, is a GMS estimated cost of $2,816,915. Now, the importance of the Turner Report, if you remember, is they looked at a 3-year window, in some cases 4 years, and that's where they assigned cost. The objective was to bring each one of the buildings up into a state of good repair. In the report, they also talked about future needs, but did not estimate those. They identified the major ones, as for instance, in GMS, at that time, there was not recommended a need for a roof. So that cost is not in there, even though it was recommended that a roof would be needed just about now. So the Turner Report did comprehend all those things. We don't need to go down through them, with the exception of, underneath that, is I broke down the major items. The LMS breakdown for $4 million did include fixing the parking lot that we're now still dealing with, replacing the roof and the skylights, and completely replacing the HVAC system. And that was all done within the $4 million. Okay, and we'll come back to that. All right, move over to the right on the on-site insight. The on-site insight report looks at a 20-year horizon, and it looks at fixing the buildings up, and then what would you need to do to maintain them. Essentially, years 1 through 4, for each one of the schools, looks at, essentially creates a state of good repair. And then you see in some years out, like 17 years, there's a spike for something to be added in. But primarily, after the 4th year, each one of them kind of goes on a flat line of so much per year. You do kind of a rolling maintenance. So the on-site insight report really is a parallel to what the H.L. Turner report was. What do you need to do to get the buildings up to a state of good repair? So the function of the two essentially is, not essentially, they are identical. Interestingly enough, and I am more than pleased, and thank you, Brian, for making sure that they also looked at the 1930s building. And I'll start with that. If you see right under year 1, there is a listing on year 1 identified as 1930s cost of $1,082,000. That is items to restore, including an elevator, and make 1930s building serviceable again. 1930s building has 4,000 square feet, equivalent to 4 classrooms, 4. Year 2, there's a $30,000 allowance for windows. So the total 1930s cost is just over $1.1 million. Okay? So then you see year 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is for, again, GMS. From the insight, this is the capital cost that they estimate each year. So it begins 3.116125, continues on through, and finishes up year 4. The total of that is $5,364,000 and some change. Deduct the 1930s building, again, to just look at GMS without the 1930s building, that cost now comes down to $4,252,000. In that cost is a roof for $819,000, a septic system for $459,000. And I'll stop there a moment, because in the H.L. Turner report, let me back up. The on-site insight obviously didn't, I won't say obviously, did not inspect the leach field in any way. Their estimate of needing replacement now is simply based upon the age. Now, I don't know if they looked at the H.L. Turner report or not, but in 2017, H.L. Turner report did an extensive evaluation of the leach field and found it in serviceable condition and had no prediction of when it would fail. So it's unsure whether this septic of $459,000 should be included in that or not. It really should be suspect until we did another inspection to confirm yes or no.
Shouldn't we fix it before it fails and school shut
No.
down?
Yeah, we gotta inspect it along the way, right? Like, you
Yeah,
gotta keep
it's-
checking it.
You do not, in fact, there's references in here, in the other ones, the other septic systems, they simply say, we don't expect it to fail for the next 20 years,
Based on time.
based on time.
Right.
But the difference is, it has been inspected, it had been serviced for a long time. There's no evidence of buildup in it, and no evidence of it being fouled. And that's what fails a leach field system. If there's no evidence, it means that it will continue to last for a long time, you simply need to check it. Doesn't mean that you need to replace it. In fact,
Well, but that's just exactly what Denise just said. Shouldn't we be inspecting and looking at it to make sure,
Yes.
sorry, yeah.
I'm not arguing inspecting. I agree 100%. It would be wise to confirm right now whether we need to do it or not. The point being is we're trying to compare Turner to here. Turner decided the septic system was not needed to be considered. On-site Insight said, based on its age, I'm putting it in there. All I'm doing is just deducting it to compare apples to apples between the two reports.
Aren't we talking about the inside, on-site, not the Turner report, though?
No,
Hang on a minute, just let me finish. Almost done. Okay. Also in this analysis, on-site Insight, there was recognition of needing to do HVA system improvements. They included in that $140,000 of engineering to evaluate that, to address the moisture. So that was not in the Turner report, so I deducted that out. So the subtotal of those deductions is $1,418,000. So the net comparison between, to make them, the Turner and the on-site Insight, the net comparison is $2,833,949. The H.L. Turner report, interestingly enough, calls for $2,816,000, or a difference of simply $17,000. What it says is the on-site Insight report justifies the Turner report, and the Turner report justifies the on-site Insight report. They look at the same thing, they do the same thing, and now we have costs by two different reports that give us exactly what it would cost to repair this. Now, look at Campbell High School.
these are rough costs. I'm not gonna accept any of these until I get them quoted.
Sure, but I think what we're saying is it's not the $30 million that we were told was gonna be required to update GMS.
Right.
It's less than 10 versus 30-some million.
This isn't updating, this is repairing.
Yes.
It's not adding on to anything.
No,
It's
but
cost-wise.
This does nothing but
But there was-
bring it into serviceable condition.
Well, just let me finish. Let
Can
me
I
just
ask you a
finish.
question? Why did you take out the sprinkler system?
There is debate whether it needs to be added. The reason I took it out is two things. A, I wanted to compare the on-site Insight and the Turner report apples to apples. If I left the Turner report, the sprinkler in it, and not added it to the on-site Insight, then we wouldn't. I could add $750 for sprinkler to the on-site Insight, which they didn't include. Ironically, they did not identify needing a sprinkler system.
That doesn't mean we don't need one, though.
Yeah, so,
Well, you've got a engineer, you've got a capital needs outfit that looks at everything in your building, and they didn't identify the sprinkler. Anyway, let me just finish, and then we can debate all we want. The Campbell High School, comparing that number. Year one, expenditure is $2,075,000. year 2 is 300,000. Year 3 has a 1,140,000 for a cost over 4 years of $3,853,000. Sorry. Subtracting the roof out of there, because same thing, the Turner report estimated a roof in the future. This has a roof repair in it. Subtracting that out, and then there is $800 in year 3 of resurfacing the parking lots. So that's $800,000. So subtracting those two figures out comes out with a net comparison of $1,901,000. The HL Turner report, looking at things on the same basis, is $1,910,000, or a net difference of $6,000. I just got one closing comment, is that, and I'll just reiterate, the on-site insight report validates what was done in 2017. The 2017 report validates what on-site insight does. And the irritating thing to me is LMS could have been done for $4 million and we've just spent 10. If we had done what Turner said back in H.O. Turner, we'd have all 3 buildings in a state of good repair for $10 million today.
It would have been pre-COVID, so it would have been a lot better
Right.
during that system.
So I hope we don't turn around and disregard what's been done again. And my one last comment, and it still irritates me, when I started bringing this up to the school board last November, one of the school board members told me to my face, we disregard what you have to say, because we have all the reports, we've done all the reports, we have all the information we need, and discounted what I was saying. The problem is, yes, you had it all, and you disregarded it yourself. So there.
Any other comments, reflections? I highly encourage people to read it, go through the link and take a look at it. I did look at GMS. I do agree with Ron, it agrees really well with H.L. Turner. Some of the things I didn't see in there that I was kind of looking for was not just replacing the boilers, but all the subsystems that go with that, because the piping in there is 30 years old, control systems, yes, they mentioned it, but they don't work. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that in there that I was expecting to see, but I didn't see.
My gut reaction was it was inclusive in there, kind of
It was
overall.
discussed in the meetings about how they had to do the electrical, mechanical, and some other stuff, and how the recommendation on the committee was to move forward with the 4 million in all 3 over a summer in 2018.
What happened?
Well, because the committee came out not recommending a new school, and let's face it, the school board has been pushing for a new building for decades. The recommendation was not the one that was accepted, and so it was shelved. In my opinion, that's what happened. It was shelved because it did not support the narrative. Because it also was discussed in those meetings that it was not groundwater that was the moisture problem, that if they'd done the mechanical systems, then the moisture concerns would have been alleviated. We were told that was wrong, and now we know that the people who were saying it was wrong were wrong themselves. So the report did not fit the narrative, in my opinion, and therefore it was shelved. Which is frustrating, because like you said, we have been chasing the wrong answer, and we've spent money we didn't need to.
$6 million in LMS.
Yep.
All right, so
And rising.
And rising.
So here's my quick thoughts. The new superintendent. on
Look what you
July 1st.
inherited.
Let me just remind everyone, I inherited it. July 1st is when I started.
Welcome to Litchfield.
No, I kid for a second, but I find this very valuable, you know, in the sense of that this is exactly what I wanted, selfishly. As not necessarily the results per se, but in the reports that were detailed, that mapped out 20 years for us, that mapped out sequencing of what things need to be done. I've talked obviously a little bit more with Tina, who did the reports, and asked some follow-up questions, like, when you group these together, that's because you're saying, I know this sounds like an obvious question, but just to reiterate, you're grouping this together because it needs to be done together, right? And like do this as one big swoop and everything. And, you know, I've said it multiple times, one of our goals in the SAU is to create a capital needs plan for the district that is not just 4 years down the road, 5 years down the road, which is 20, 30, 50 years down the road. I feel going through this, we can deliver on that now, because this is gonna be a huge tool to kind of do that. And obviously, there's gonna be, this stuff's not cheap in here, regardless of whether it's a new school or repairs, or when you put the 3 schools together, there's a lot of money here. So how do we plan for this in a way that doesn't break the taxpayers' backs, but allows us to maintain and improve our facilities as needed over the course of 20, 30 years? So the town's in good shape, the school's in good shape, that we can be successful. So I look at this as very valuable. I mean, I've been trying to process what to do with it. If you see, I really wish there was one school that needed immediate attention, but as I read this, there's 2, and it's CHS and GMS. I think GMS is obviously more of an immediate concern. That's why we're talking about it in greater detail in these meetings and stuff like that. But I don't want CHS to fall by the wayside, not jump ahead of GMS, but we can't let it fall by the wayside. And if you look at these reports, just to bring it up to that repairs level, this is ignoring any educational stuff, which we'll talk about separately from any of this. It's gonna cost the most at CHS to maintain that over the course of this 20-year projection here. So that's stuff we have to start putting money away for, so we don't have to constantly bond every single thing that has to happen here.
Can I ask a question? Why wasn't that being done?
I don't know, I started July 1st, just to remind
Why wasn't
you.
one?
Why don't we have capital improvement for all the recommended,
Go
seven
ahead,
years ago?
Carrie.
Well, the reality is, we shot ourselves in the foot many years ago. Because when the CHS bond was paid off, the expectation was that money was to roll into GMS. So we ended up, the bond payment at the time was just under $800,000. And rather than refund it to the taxpayer, the intent, the promise, was that we would catch up on deferred maintenance. Have we seen an additional $800,000 in maintenance in the buildings? No.
The what?
So, because, well, part of it I will think, well, it was also about the time when the state decided they weren't funding retirements anymore. So, originally back in the 70s, the state kind of coerced all the cities and towns into joining the retirement system with a promise of funding 35% of it. And then slowly over time it became next, and then in 2011 it became 0. So all of a sudden, we got left on the hook for a massive increase in pension funds.
In August, by the way.
Yeah, it was right as budget season was hitting.
After everything had
There was, and there was no split. It was directly on the backs of the taxpayers. And this town was, the state was cutting money. We were facing a $2 million budget hit in addition to this. Because I remember there being 3 community meetings as to, well, how much can we absorb? And the school board actually did cut $2 million. It was then restored a little bit, possibly from robbing Peter to pay Paul. But there was it was an interesting time when there was a lot of financial issues and concerns and contracts. So my guess is that the money, well, we hadn't done maintenance in years, so it's another couple of years. We have this pool of money that's supposed to go towards maintenance, but we have people to pay instead. So my guess is maintenance just continued to get kicked down the line of priority. And now we're paying the price. Because if we had put in $800,000 in maintenance over the past 8 years by now, we would have had a really nice GMS.
So, and I think that's what the report touched on that I liked, was they actually gave a recommendation for every school, go start a fund to fund this, right? So
Yep.
they're asking for, they stated out initial infusion, but then go start that capital improvement fund at each building.
Right. I liked that. Unfortunately, I've seen what we're up against in the budget season, and I'm really like,
I don't think we should deposit $4 million.
that's just not happening.
Capital reserve accounts, but, and I think you nailed it on the head there a little bit. I think the reason why it hasn't occurred, has been true in other communities as well, is you have more immediate needs that arrive, right? Like, this is long-term investing. I mean, just think, well, maybe it's just me selfishly, personally, in my personal life. Yeah, I know I should be saving more for retirement or saving away to do this thing, but man, I wanna go do this thing right now, right? So that's okay, I'm gonna take this little money right now, or I need to do this thing right now, right? Like, I think recently, just a few years ago, but the pipes burst in my basement, right? And at that point, we could have just done some basic repairs to our kitchen, because it came down from our kitchen and stuff like that, or we could bite the bullet and redo the entire kitchen, right? Which then bit into our savings for in the future. And so we were like, we're just gonna take care of the kitchen right now, which was not the plan, what not laid out, but we had this immediate accident happen, unplanned thing happen, and we just took our long-term money to do it. So for, all the changes in education funding and various things benefit, all this stuff, like, there's good intentions to do it, but like, you can't have everything from a town perspective when you're trying to approve stuff. So I'm assuming, like a lot of places, you dealt with more immediate needs with the finances that you had, right, to take care of things.
And then part of the problem is we get so far behind that
Right.
to, now, to get us to actually where we should be, right? It was $4 million to put
Yeah.
into, you know what I mean?
But there
So-
was, let's be honest too, there was a period of time where we were like, why put more money into GMS? Because we're gonna replace it. There was a conscious decision at one point to stop with these things,
That was about-
which then becomes a compounding problem. Like, we're not gonna invest in it, we're gonna replace it.
actually more than that.
Oh crap, now we need to now we need to fix it, and now we've shot ourselves because we made our problem worse by not addressing it in the first place.
The
So-
community I just left, where I was working before, so they took the bite out of the apple a few years ago and did a warrant article where they were depositing $1 million a year into their reserve fund, every single year. That was just gonna be a standing warrant article moving forward, right? It's a different community, different setup, it's not SB2, there's lots of differences, I don't want to say it's apples to apples. But the advantage of that is now they have built some reserves, so they can just do a cycle, like last year, it's town meeting style, town meeting vote, the traditional $1 million, boom, approved. The very next article, hands raised, we're gonna spend about $800,000 on a new roof here, on this here, on this here, and this here, and they did it all in one big cycle, and it's just there. And it's not in an operating budget, it's nothing like that. But that community had to sacrifice pretty big to get that off the ground, right?
Yeah.
And that's what you have to figure out if your community is ready to take that type of step.
Well, and that's where, like, in the report suggests a capital infusion, but for like GMS, they're only suggesting like 150 grand a year goes into capital reserve for a standing like reinvestment. And then they got similar quantities, proportional similar quantities for the other three schools. But before people take off, I think we need to get through something together. And that is,
Still got-
one of the biggest things on here is going through the what I'm calling address categories out of all the surveys, and I want the committee to decide that. So no viewing results until we come through this. It's kind of what I brought up at the last meeting, like some addresses were complete, some just said election, some had emails in it, and going through that. So Dan is okay, he can leave.
I can't vote, so.
Concert?
Concert.
I may be there.
So
Kid, Greg it?
these are the numbers that come up. There's 871, there was an extra paper copy, I didn't get a chance to add it to this pool.
My
But,
fault, sorry.
no, it's fine. I can add it to this data file. My intent is, we're gonna go through this. I will send out this data file, and then I will send out basically a copy of all the graphs of the address selections that we picked. So then that way, everyone's gonna get raw data, and everyone's gonna get the combined data that we said are usable in this committee. So, looking at all of these, Joe, thank you very much for helping put this all together. Joe, Matt, and I went through looking at it to verify that we all got the same ideas and numbers for this. This data does not contain personal information, so that has been removed out of this, just so when it gets distributed out, and that's how we did it this way. Out of 871 responses, 734 had complete addresses. Those are a no-brainer to me, right? Those stay in. I combined the September election, November election into just elections, right? These were paper copies that people just wrote election in the address and handed to us then, and after that. And going from there. There were 81 that had a street name, but just missing the number. One was missing, just had a number and no street name. There was 3 that just had Fall Fest on it, 2 that said Town Hall, 1 was like Londonderry, so it was out of town, so, and yeah, I'm gonna throw that one out. And then others just had, somebody put email addresses in the address spot, and then others, just had Litchfield. So, I would say, like, I'm all for the complete, the missing the numbers, elections, town hall, and the town only. I don't know if anybody else has any ideas.
I would include the email as well, they gave us something. It identifies them.
Okay?
I think I might just eliminate the one that's out of town.
And just leave everything else in there?
I mean, it's not gonna be statistically,
Significant?
Significant to change those, yeah. And, I mean, you gotta figure that folks were from town. I mean, I don't think we're gonna have people filling them out
certainly
5
the
times.
34 people in election live in town.
Yeah,
It's a
Spoke to
good,
all the
reasonable
focus
assumption.
Can I ask you a question? Each one of those has missing those, but wasn't it just, there was supposed to be just one thing that you could choose on there to identify that
The
you
only
were?
thing that was required was your address.
Yeah, so we decided on the address as the required portion.
And so when you say missing number, is that missing number for the address?
Yeah,
So
so
yeah,
they
it just says like
Okay.
Smith Street.
Yeah,
All right, if it doesn't have a number in the address, I say kick it out.
okay, so what,
So you're looking at going to the other extreme.
Yeah.
I think the one extreme is to accept all of them except for the one that was clearly out of town.
Right.
The other extreme is to accept only the complete ones.
Right.
I don't know,
and
missing the
nothing else.
street
There
one
there are gonna
though.
be people who didn't fill out their address because they didn't wanna have,
Right.
to have their,
right.
be able to be identified.
The number is fine, but missing the street though, how do I know it's not 9 Main Street, Manchester?
Right.
It's
Well,
one
and-
person.
Or is it saying 9 Litchfield?
it's one data point, though.
Yeah, but
right, but so then it's not gonna swing it, so I would say we should do the due diligence and remove it, just like the out of town. But for like the election, I
well,
mean,
clearly they're in town.
right, so, I
Yeah.
mean, those were paper copies handed directly to us at the box
Right.
for election, so that's where I'm like, yeah, those should be in there. Fall Fest, I'm 50-50 on, right, cause it could have been out of towners at Fall Fest as well.
Yeah, I would keep, in my opinion, I would keep the missing numbers. I would keep the election. I would keep the town hall. And I would keep the emails.
I mean, if you're concerned with the email and people felt comfortable, you could share
You
it
could reach
with-
out to them.
Or just, yeah, that's probably even a better idea. I was gonna say, you could give us the emails and we can cross-reference it in our Power School system and see if it pops up,
Yeah, again, it's 3 of them.
What was
I-
town only again?
They just
Yeah, but
wrote
if they're
Litchfield.
not associated with
Oh,
the school, they might not.
Yeah, I know. As soon
Yeah,
as-
they just wrote Litchfield, New Hampshire 03052, is the typical response that I saw for that.
I'm less comfortable with that one, because how do you know, like, oh, that's where I am right now, let me just put that
Yeah,
in.
that's why I said, I would keep.
Yep.
I would
They knew the
keep
zip
those.
code.
Yeah, well, I know the actual one too, then I live there.
I'm just kidding.
So, I mean, I'm kind of aligned with Joe.
Alright, so say your recommendation.
You wanna highlight the ones I just said to him? That might make it easier for people to see.
That's the spreadsheet I went over before you got here.
So the yellow ones are,
I was listening.
Oh,
Those are the ones I would keep,
But
and I
I'm glad to
would
see it though.
toss the rest
You
of
want-
them.
you can have it if you want.
You're looking at eliminating 16
right,
spots.
out of 870. Go ahead.
Can I play devil's advocate, because it's my favorite role to play?
Okay.
You do a good
I'm
job
gonna-
at it.
I don't get a vote in it anyway, but I think if we're looking to have the results be deemed valid by anyone, I would say if you start to vote who you're voting off, even though we're not looking at the data, the perception is gonna be, well, they didn't care what I had to say anyway, because they crossed off the one I was in. I was in that category.
Do you, I'm wondering if someone's gonna remember that they forgot the street, or,
Yeah, that
But-
sounds like
but
an
it-
and quite frankly, at the same time, there were clear instructions.
Oh, there-
So if
there
you
were.
decided not to follow the instructions,
That's, I mean, it's normal election balance, it's exactly like that, right? If you don't sign in the exact spot,
Yeah.
it's gone.
Nope.
So,
and how many were you eliminating?
16 right
So
now.
16 people might say, you didn't care what I had to say, which I, don't want anyone to say that, but,
I agree with Jim.
Yeah.
except for
Or
the out
can
of
you,
towner.
can you just segregate them? These are the questionable ballots?
Well, so
To see if it even matters.
Yeah.
let's put it this way. My initial response is, I'm not going to delete their responses. I'm gonna say our recommendation to the school board should be based upon the ones that are highlighted. I'm gonna keep the data file with all the data in it. My recommendation coming out of this, right, I don't wanna go into an in-depth thing on the data. This is flash up the graphs, here's what it looks like. I'll send it out with the data as it is, and I sanitize some of the comments and stuff, because it was directed at certain people, and stuff. And then it is, you guys go find your own insights and come back to next meeting with it. So that would be my recommendation. I hear what you're saying, but I also hear the aspect of, God, I forgot to put down the number, right? Or, no, but there's also some of them that are just,
I mean, the other thing we can do that would be a little bit more work is we could just literally just take the completes, analyze it, take all the others, analyze it, and just see, does that align with the, proportionally align with?
Statistically.
yeah.
So that way we could then just say,
I set up this file to do it easily. So this is all done by pivot tables, and like, if we all agree, I'll just select the ones in there and it'll change the graphs automatically for you.
so we may be overthinking this, it may be worth just
I
doing
mean,
the
I think
exercise.
I'm back to, the only one I would eliminate is the one that's out of town. It's not, none of them, nothing's gonna swing it dramatically.
I would think that
Unless
nothing's gonna swing it dramatically
unless-
either, but.
What's the largest number, 11?
No, 81, the missing numbers.
We're gonna count those though.
Oh, yeah, so it's
Right,
11.
so it's 11. So it's,
Well, 30, no, yeah, 11.
11 is the largest.
I mean, I agree, I mean, I don't have a problem keeping all of them either, right, like, I mean, they're.
I mean, we were looking for what, 970, we got 870?
But I don't know that was, yeah.
So
Can
that was also based upon, the Economic Development Survey got this, and we went for a certain percentage of the voters at the March election, like the real statistics, if you, I mean, Mike, I'm gonna butcher his last name, sent me an email that you can go to
Yanukovych?
yeah, him, sent us an email that if you go into like lean manufacturing, to get a 95% survey, you needed 480 inputs. And that's 95% coverage. So, I mean, like, we close to doubled that.
I
So-
came up with the 933 basically because it seemed like a reasonable number
Right.
that the
Yeah.
community would accept and understand.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we tried as hard as we could,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
It's still this is still representative,
Just my
by
opinion.
any statistical
Yep.
test, that
Okay,
this is
and
representative.
like Matt just said, instructions were crystal clear. So I say you take the pure ones and you don't take anything that's not complete. Like the complete ones are good, election is good, town hall is good. You can verify that those are proper. You don't, if somebody just happened to get a ballot or a survey and just wrote Route 3A or Page Road or whatever, they could be turning them in from out of town. Without a ballot, no. If they're not pure, to me, they shouldn't be counted.
But if you're asking for pure, then that's only the 734. You can't say election.
No, election, because.
People came with people to the election.
Yeah, but you had to come in, you had to come
We
up
weren't in the
together.
building though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
you're
was the only
outside the
problem.
building. I talked to a lot of people who were bringing elderly relatives from
Yeah.
out of town. So if your argument is pure
Then
and
it's
the
the second.
Why don't we
instructions
just,
were
why
clear,
don't we just run a couple of the pivot
complete is the
tables
only
real
one you
quick,
can go with.
just to see, because again, we may be like
Again,
spinning our wheels
that's
on
the
something
point.
that doesn't matter.
Dan's
I don't know,
done pivot tables,
Yeah.
so we can actually
Yeah.
look at if it statistically changes anything.
alright, so, to go with that, this is everything included, right? If it's highlighted blue, everything's included.
Take the out of town out, we should never include that one, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, do that, give me that.
There you go.
I'm not a master at pivot tables, I do it all in MATLAB, so. So this is with everything selected, so this is question 2. This is the top 20 snapshot, I have the full graph. This is select all the reasons why Article 1 didn't pass. These are all of the answers that came up. There was in total 2,102 responses that I had to segregate and then aggregate. These are all the ones that had more than one response to it. So there was a whole bunch that
were type-ins, right?
were type-ins, and honestly, a lot of the type-ins were exactly like one of the other responses, they just put their own spin on it, type thing. So this is kind of exactly what comes out of
I can't see him.
that, and then,
Oh, wow. Oh, my. Oh, that's not a,
so then it's, like, if you guys wanted to see the full one, like, that's just what it looks
It's
like when you try to.
real fast.
Yeah, because all of these were type-ins, right, so.
I wanna know what your reaction's all about now. You ain't gonna say what's going on in your head.
So I did,
no, I don't need to, you just need to look at those things.
so I didn't change the responses. Now, if I really wanted to, I could have gone in like synopsis, like, there's 14
funny.
different spins on taxes, right?
Yeah, I think that this, gives us a pretty accurate.
I guess
So,
I'm surprised that these people who had checked more than one box on why they didn't vote for it.
Well, most
And
people
only
check.
3 of them put taxes?
no, those are type-ins.
Taxes wasn't an
Oh,
option.
okay.
Those are type-ins.
Oh, all right.
All I did
Cost was
was,
an option, which
Yeah,
is the
so-
number one answer.
right, so I took the thing out and just basically looked at what has more than one response to it. And this is just what, like, exactly it came up as. Question 3, it is, by far the largest majority, so this is what's the top priority focus, education, cost, or both.
Yellow is lower cost options.
Oh, your numbers messed me up there for a minute, I'm like 440%, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, 440 responses, 51% voted for should be lowest cost.
The lowest cost options.
No,
It's the lowest cost in educational.
Should I be?
combined, that was a combined.
Should have
Lowest,
equal
lowest
part.
cost only was the yellow, which was
Right.
16%.
Yep.
Educational only was the blue, which was 33%, but the majority was 51% at a combination of the two.
Correct. Yep.
So 84% want something other than a coastal loan.
Correct.
Well, what?
So, we're not gonna go into the deep diving of the data. I'm gonna send this out. People are to go back and go develop their own insights.
On it?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was searching for the joke there.
No.
All right. Questions 4 and 5. Renovate GMS without an addition, renovate GMS with an addition. Yeah, this is just what fit on my screen reasonably. So, this is kind of, again, this is what it shows. These are the totals that people responded with. So out of the 871 responses, or 870, 853 answered the questions, 852 respectively, so it's a pretty good turnout of actually answering the questions. And again, it's just what it shows. This is what I meant by, I wasn't a fan of the color choices, but,
It's easy, I think it's easier than what Google does.
yeah, but I mean, I can
No,
change
it's
the colors to where the
festive.
heck. Who wants to be,
It's very Christmassy, nice.
I was gonna say, who wants to be festive? Everybody good here?
Yep.
So this is a new GMS, and then this is sending 7th and 8th, possibly 7th to the high school. And I did paraphrase what the question was in the graph title, because it just wasn't going to fit.
That's why I have it.
Everybody good?
Wait a minute, wait.
Hold on a second, yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah.
The left box there, build new GMS at lower cost.
Yep.
If you combine the dark green and the light green, you have what,
78.
78%, something like that?
Yep.
You only need 60%
You need 60%, but we only had 40% in the bond. So the lower cost is the driving factor there.
Yeah.
Right.
Big time.
The delta of 28% is the cost.
Mhm. But I mean, there's ways that I can look at this,
Monkey wrench at this.
but
It's because of what I do.
I mean, it's one of those things of, you know, you can apply a weighting scale to all of this, so you can break this down numerically, right? Carrie, this will be like right at your heart of like, strongly support gets a 1, and support
Yeah.
gets a 0.5, and strongly not support gets a -1. So then it's just, I don't care what the graph looks like, give me numbers, type thing.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, an easier way to
Yep.
actually process it.
Well, when we started this process, if you remember correctly, I stated that the majority of people that are gonna fill out this survey are gonna be those that are in favor of a new school, and this validates what I said.
Okay, so what more could we, because I had a feeling that you'd say that, so what more could we possibly have done to get more people to respond?
I don't know, but.
I don't know that there's more that we can do, but you have to look at it with, remember who received most of the correspondence about it was people who were in the school.
I mean-
And if you look back to Rich's point as to what the vote was for the school, it was 53 or 54 to 46, right? It was,
Right, and so the follow-up to Rich's point was, so the majority of those people, it was the cost, that was the problem.
so, I mean, it's informative and we can use it to make a decision how we're gonna go forward. I just think it's probably weighted more towards a new school than it probably is in reality.
But
Outside.
those are the people who are going to come and vote again. Those are the people who are going to be overrepresented when we vote on.
The people that want the school?
The people who.
So are the people who don't want the school, right? So
But I mean, again, I think at the
I don't know, it's
onset,
gonna
at the
take the
onset of
turnout.
this, though, we agreed, we're gonna go out, we're gonna try to get a certain number that's statistically significant, and we're just gonna see what they say, right? Like, and we're gonna try to reach everyone, and I think we can all agree that we did everything we could to try to reach people. I mean, we sent a mailer to everyone's door. I mean, even Carrie said at a budget meeting, like, I have to say, I did at least get it, right? Like, that's all we can do. Like, at some point, we have to be able to like, try to have make some
Yeah.
decisions off of some sort of data.
The one thing you need to consider, the last election, there was 5,500 votes cast.
No. Are you talking about the presidential election?
the presidential election, yes.
Yeah.
Big.
So there were 5,500 voters in this town in the last election.
What was the town elect? What
but
was
the
the
town
last
one was
town
20
warrant
it
article?
It doesn't make any difference, all I'm saying is that we got that
27.
many voters out.
They exist.
Right. So,
They had an opportunity.
so you, at 800 people, you don't even have a quarter of that.
So, but if you look at the town elections, right, the most, I think that we had in, as far as I can remember, was the last one at 2,700, right?
And some change, yeah.
The 5,000 is a presidential election, which I mean, maybe, I would be shocked if we doubled the number of people at the last town election. Unless we came out with a school that was $66 million, and then maybe we might, because they,
Yeah.
I think the 26 or 2,700 was largely because there was a huge,
Alright,
bond.
so the last two. So this is reorganizing the grades within the 3 schools, and then this is 9th and 12th grades out of district.
9 through 12.
9 through 12, sorry, 9 through 12. Which is.
I think we knew that, I think I knew that.
Hard no.
That slide doesn't surprise me at
Can you
all.
go back, go back one slide?
I gotta go, guys.
See you later, Bob, thank you.
Thank you. So there's pretty reasonable support for moving 8 and 7 to CHS.
Yeah, alright, depending on how you wanna dissect the data, right? You can dissect it in 50 different ways.
Did
if
you
wanted to.
did you happen to do something with the weighting that you just talked about?
No,
Okay.
I did not have a chance.
Okay.
Work decided to blow up in my face in the last 2 weeks.
Well, that's fine,
Oh,
we
I
can,
hate that.
I hate the whole job thing, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's.
it really gets in the way of our free town work that we do.
Yeah, but I've seen what the tax bills are going to go up, keep working.
So, and then going back to this, it's reorganizing the schools and the 9 through 12 out of district.
But
I'm
that's
not,
30% of people who would actually consider it.
yeah,
Sorry, say it again?
It's 30% of people who would consider it, which seems,
Consider what?
sending 9 through 12 out of district.
No, that's the other way around. Like, most people said no to that.
No, but
She's saying she's saying at least 30, she said at least 30%
that
of people
seems
would
higher
consider.
than we expected.
Oh, no.
Oh, no, that doesn't
It's
surprise me at all.
11% would strongly,
No.
right, and
That number seems
19%
right
that
about
would
right.
support.
Yeah.
Right.
That's still, I mean, it's higher than I thought it would be, to be honest with you.
I think it's right up there, because a lot of people remember doing it, but I guess my thing is, there is associated cost with doing that.
Yes.
So,
Yes,
and
I think
and
that-
there's significant associated cost with doing that.
I would think though, when you're making the argument of like, well, anyone that's saying, well, this is clearly just all people that are in support of the schools, like, that's an appreciable amount of people that I didn't expect to see. So I think that does show that we did achieve some sort of balance in this.
I think it's a high number, I thought, but I don't think, honestly, not that I'm speaking for the entire board, but I don't think the school board would even entertain it.
Yeah,
It was included only because it's been floated in.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And it was something that was mentioned all the time on the What's Up page, right? Was, why don't we just do this again and reorganize within the districts? Reorganize the other buildings. But there is, decent support, and I mean, you're kind of looking at 50% are, looking at redistributing throughout the 3 buildings.
Is there a way for us to, I know I don't want to create a lot of work right now, but is there a way for us to throw like the equation in for like, just to weight these things using the like 2s and 1s? Just so we can
do math on the spot.
Well, it's Excel, so you just do it once and then you copy it. Right?
Before we go too far though, I do want to get back to our original question, like, this is the data that includes everything.
Right.
So do you want to go back and switch it to just the complete ones and see if that changes anything?
I think the other thing is all the questions are listed there for a response of some sort. It does not weight people's preference to each of those.
That's what we're talking about. If we assign a 2 to strongly support, a 1 to support, a -1 to
Right.
don't support, and a -2 to strongly don't support, now it's weighting the responses.
I think that's too arbitrary.
How do you feel like that's too arbitrary? It's giving a numerical weight to the responses.
But
It's more accurate than adding the 2 greens together and the 2 reds together.
It would actually get you to the same place.
No, it wouldn't.
Oh, no, it wouldn't, I guess, yeah.
No, it wouldn't. It's, so,
You could do the math in your head, you don't have to do it in the Excel.
No, but
But it
Let's just
gives
see
you a
if it
score,
changes.
it gives you a
Yeah.
score then, where you can
You
actually
take-
say, okay, like,
You take
is
both
this,
the
is this
lights.
number generally, is it a negative number or a positive number? I mean, that's
Yeah.
one way you can look
People
at
who
it.
follow direction now, we can.
I heard.
how
Yeah.
they-
that
Just this,
right there is the biggest tell in my mind.
yeah.
you're
So
looking.
I may not have linked this to the addresses, so I will make sure that this gets linked before I send it out. I'm pretty sure it is. Again, it was very late when I was trying to do this, and this was the hardest one to do. But again, we're taking out, I'm not gonna do it here.
That's fine.
Yeah, just
I don't think that
move
would
on.
matter. There's a pretty large jump there.
Yeah. So, again, this one really didn't move much with just looking at the complete. It's still like exactly 50%. Dual, low cost in education.
Or 80% includes education.
Right.
Yeah.
But the red went from 51 to
Yeah.
50. It wasn't like a huge jump.
So,
This one changed a little.
yeah, so these changed a little bit. The one without the addition changed a little bit. Right there.
Memorize those numbers?
I did probably 60 hours in trying to get this set up. Just because I haven't done pivot tables in a long time. So like, this is where there's, complete addresses only, the one without the addition, the would, call it the light green, jumped up decent amount.
The only difficulty with this is we have no idea what people think renovate means.
Yep. Well, but again, right,
I think
the
that's for us to
purpose of
decide and
this,
recommend.
well,
What?
in the
That's for us to
purpose of
decide and
this.
recommend.
Right.
Right, like if renovate is the solution that we end up on, it's this committee's job to figure out, with all these different reports we have, what renovate means and what is included in that project scope. And that's our recommendation to the school board. Our project scope to renovate the school could be roof, boilers, the AC system, doing new doors, alarms, a fence, and a 20 by 20 addition.
And talk to the educators and get their opinion with the
Right.
education component.
So, and I think that's gonna be one of the things, right? We're gonna use this as a gross like compass pointer, where do we wanna focus on versus looking at 15 different things. So, I think that's what, we would have to use it as. This one also gained a lot more support, you know, looking at, again, the light green is what kind of changed the most, looking at just the complete addresses.
So the weighting would be probably very important in how we look at those.
Yeah.
I think the weighting is, I think we need to look at them at the weighting, because it's hard to
Yeah.
just look at pie
But
charts.
it does change.
Yep. Again, this again changed a lot, right, for the build new GMS, strongly support, jumped up.
Can I go back to that weighting? I can't see why you would weight him, because a vote is a vote.
No, it's not, because someone that voted for strongly support
Yeah.
is showing a higher preference for something than someone who just supports.
So-
Same thing with someone who strongly doesn't support, they're showing a higher preference for not supporting. Otherwise, we should have just asked, do you support or do you not support?
But the question is, those represent individual votes.
Right.
And if you then add a weight to some votes and not others, then you're giving more weight to some votes.
You're weighting the
Everything's
response.
weighted.
You're weighting the
not
response.
No, you're weighting the votes. Each one of those is how you break the, what do we got? 917?
So what's the value of asking whether you strongly support or only support, or,
Well, you can see if you get this great strongly support, okay, well, that really supports it.
so meaning you'd weight that?
It's already weighted, that's my point, it's already weighted.
There's more votes tallied for that. So my purpose with the weighting is we get away from high numbers and we break it into what has a higher positive versus.
Ranked responses almost.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it's a ranked response. So,
It's just another way of looking at the same data. I mean, it's telling the same story. It's just I think an easier way of looking at it.
it's how to put it into a numerical factor, because the other thing you can do is you can try to normalize the data based upon total number of responses, so it all has the same baseline, but you're getting into funky math to try to do that, because everything is variable with the number of responses.
I think the other thing that it might be an interesting tell on is that if you look at the total number of responses to certain things, particularly as it relates to strongly support, someone that might strongly support something may not have answered other questions at all. So I think it's just,
Right, so that's why I left the grand totals up here, so out of like 734 complete addresses, only 721 answered it. Still like 99 percentile, but it's like, there's some questions that had, like, there's only 250 comments, which actually I was expecting like every response to have a comment at the end, honestly.
I think it's more than that.
260, I don't know, I broke them all out in the tab in here.
The comments?
Yeah,
I encourage everybody to go read them. Like, I read through all of them.
Yep,
There's some good stuff in there.
I did, so I sanitized what you and I discussed. Well, there was a couple of them in there,
Yeah.
right, that like pointed directly at people. So we
You
just,
can't do that.
yeah, so there were some things of where like I just put in redacted, and then I changed it to generalize what the comment was meant to do or speaking to versus pointing directly at people.
Okay, so you sanitized the comments that needed to be,
Yeah,
okay.
and then the other questions. These didn't move as much. So that's about it. Again, I created, here's pivot table for the first graph. I gotta go make sure that the slicer works for this one. Here's the pivot table for for question 3. All the other pivot tables. Here's the raw data. So again, when you took that question 2, it puts everything in comma delimited into like a single cell. So I had to break all of that out and then put it all in the same line. So that took me about 20 hours to do, which was fun. What I also did was I segregated out all of the emails, put it in a separate tab. So now we have like an information distribution list so we can filter on who said yes, wants to be notified, so we can do regular communications out. And then I've got all of the comments in here as well. I didn't associate it with anything else, not trying to tie it, just looking at the comments here's what people are saying. And then at the very end, here is the raw export from Google Sheets. And again, I sanitized the comments and I removed personal information out of it.
And we still have access to the Google Sheets,
Yes.
which are completely unmodified.
Yes, yeah, no, I haven't touched the Google form. The only thing I may do is I may unlock it to import the last thing and then recreate this. So then that way, we get that last response, or I'll just manually enter the one response into here.
I would do that.
Yeah.
Recreating this is not gonna be fun.
What was refresh my memory here, what was our purpose in collecting the street data?
That was the sort of control for making sure that we were getting.
Okay, so we're not trying to, let's say, the over 55s, what
No.
was there?
No, because
We
we're
don't
not
wanna
looking
do
at,
that?
when
No.
we're looking at the data, we're not looking
I mean, if you
at,
got 9 people at an address, they might be like, well, maybe this
Yeah.
is a little fishy, but other than that, like.
Yeah, that's what we look at it for, is basically, is this a Litchfield address? And how many of the same address did we get? And there was not, I don't think I remember correctly, there was anything more than 4 at a
4
single
at the
address?
same address.
Which is reasonable.
Yeah.
Right.
If we had 43 at a single address, then, you know,
Right.
red
Yeah.
lower flag, but.
It was just to make sure that somebody wasn't stuffing the ballot box, basically.
Yep, and it was to somebody actually answered Londonderry, and I was like, okay, well,
You're out.
Thanks for being, oh, maybe their kids tuitioned into the district, who knows?
right, but,
Other towns, maybe we could have a conversation.
yeah. So,
What are we gonna do with all this then? What's the?
well, so.
Are you
the
gonna send
point-
it out, or? what?
Yes, so my point is that I'm gonna go through, we can select, if we don't wanna select what addresses we wanna keep in our recommendation up to the school board, now, my suggestion is I can send this out to look at the different, on how to, do the filtering. Again, it's just click on these boxes and it'll update everything. But that's, my point is, people are interested to see what it says. View, here's the data, go deep dive it all you want.
I think if we're gonna deep dive it though, we should probably come to an agreement on what categories we're gonna.
I would agree as well, because,
Use.
right, like, you don't want a situation where we're looking at the data and saying, oh, let's include
Let's
this
try to
section,
tailor
'cause
it to a certain- right.
It favors this response
Right,
more than
right.
the other. That was the whole point of making this decision before we even looked at the data.
Right.
Is so that we weren't kind of tainting that by saying, well, if we keep these people in, it gives a better response
Right.
here or there.
Right.
I think look, the guys that did the survey, people that worked on it, you make a decision, send it out.
Well, I don't know, I don't want that to be the case, because I don't want it to be that.
Somebody's
one
gonna make a
person-
decision.
I think we, I think as a majority vote in here, it should be the decision, so
Let's
that
go
way.
down each
Well, we
and
need to
every one.
vote on it now before we go home.
Alright, so, everybody in favor for keeping completes?
I
Okay,
can't
majority vote.
I'm a non-voting member, so
So-
it's nothing against or for.
So so we're gonna keep complete. Elections,
I'm sorry, what was,
Why don't you just go down the list?
what does elections mean?
It means
They
this is voted
filled it out at the election.
Oh,
And they wrote election instead of an address.
Or they wrote nothing, and I just categorized it as election when I was.
because it was handed to us
Okay,
directly at the box and at
So
the
that's
table.
where the box came.
all right,
My
okay,
guys, we handed our vote in, I
Alright.
think you guys.
Yeah,
yeah.
I was there the whole time.
Yep.
Are
So,
we voting on election now?
yes,
Okay.
Yep,
That's fine.
election,
alright. Emails,
And what was the email again?
they put emails instead of an address in the address box.
I
They
think
put
we
an
can
email
verify
address instead of an
that.
actual address.
It's verifiable.
Okay, Fall Fest,
Yeah, I mean, it's, no.
I'm not voting for that.
okay. Alright, so Fall Fest is out, missing the number for their address, but has a street name.
you can vote, you wanna vote?
Okay,
I'm voting.
so that one says in missing the street name but has a number.
Don't vote for that.
Out of town, yeah, town hall.
I think, yeah.
And then ones that just had town only.
So, question, for town hall, is it just one that was in a town hall Dropbox, or was it one that was actually handed to somebody at town hall?
No, it was in the town hall Dropbox.
It was in the town hall Dropbox, and there was also ones like they just wrote town hall in the address for it.
So then, back to the other thing, how do you know that that's a person who was actually in town? And not a contractor or somebody else?
That's a fair point, and it's only 2, so I mean,
Not, I mean, again, just.
No, no, it's a
For
good
the
point.
integrity point, it'd be one thing if like the town clerks are like, yeah, I know
I
this
think
person.
that's a lot of effort that someone went through to like go to the town hall and find this thing.
I
voted there.
hear you, but if you're gonna disqualify Fall Fest, then.
Yeah, that's a good point.
No, that was a publicly advertised thing, as opposed to like,
Right.
the town hall, someone had to go there to find it. It's not like we advertised that, hey, there's a box at the town hall, go fill it
Yes,
out.
we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Easy to
did.
find, but.
Yeah,
We absolutely did say that these were gonna be in certain locations.
but there were only 2 of them that didn't
I'm just
have.
saying, for
Yeah.
argument's
So-
sake is, if you're gonna do it for one,
I
For
tend to,
consistency.
I tend to agree, for the 2 counts, now town only, where they just wrote Litchfield.
Just a question, can we cross-reference that against emails, like, can we verify who these people are?
I don't know that-
If it ever came down to that,
No.
like if people said,
I honestly don't think we would want to go down that road, because
It's only
it's,
3 people, right?
Sorry, what did we?
no,
That was
it's
11.
only.
Yeah, that was 11.
so,
So 11?
So-
Talk about that.
But either way, I think, you know what, I think, we don't know if they gave an email.
Right.
We'd have to go back to those and see
so we'd
if
have
they
to
gave an
back,
email.
Yeah,
okay.
yes.
I was
I would
just thinking, if
just-
it's verifiable, then we'd have something to stand up to
I
people
would
who
probably, I
say.
think that, I would probably just scrap those.
So,
Good night, guys.
good night.
Good
Have
luck.
fun.
Where you going, Carrie?
Second.
Be kind.
You do realize it's when you go, right?
It's, wait a minute, it's in the Boy Scout, it's in the Boy Scout oath, you have to be.
It also said be trustworthy, helpful, courteous, kind.
Medium, cheerful,
And
thrifty,
thrifty.
clean,
Thrifty!
Oh, no.
clean and reverent.
I'm pretty sure that's in there.
Yes, it is.
But I also was never a Boy Scout. Remember, they
Right.
wasn't open to girls when I went.
Right.
So,
Non-gender specific.
Bye, Carrie.
so with that, so it looks like the ones that we're taking out are out of town, town only, Fall Fest, and town hall. Everything else is staying in.
Yeah,
Why are we taking out town hall?
Because to Carrie's point, if we're gonna take out Fall Fest, it could be, theoretically, anyone could walk into town hall, it could be a contractor from a different group to do it. I don't care, it's 2 votes out of 871, and I don't think it's gonna move the needle in either way.
And again, none of the comments are, like, we have all the original data, so if you
Right.
wanna see what the comments said, if there was any comments attached to these, you can go look at them.
Yep. Okay, so we,
And we're gonna keep emailing, because you could
We can
figure out the email and find out. if-
Right.
If you were willing to give us an email, I feel like
Alright.
you're not trying. Josh is. You gotta have some faith, a little bit.
A little bit, do I have to?
trust but verify.
What I do?
All right.
Actually, the Russian.
Am I missing anything?
Nope, you're good.
do you want to add a thing under total responses for total responses counted, so that we can just see it, I mean, it's not.
I don't know what I'm gonna read it, but it's gonna be interesting.
I have cataracts. I have a cataract surgery.
Oh,
852.
That's pretty good.
Very worried.
Alright. So again, I'm gonna leave this highlighted, you guys can play with the filters all you want. But this is what we're agreeing on that we're gonna base our decision off of, are the highlighted sections and the highlighted categories. So, if you guys wanna eke out insights by playing around with the filters, be my guest, but that's what we're agreeing to. Okay?
Makes sense?
I like it.
Are you gonna do the weighted thing too?
I can.
That out. That'd be
Yeah,
great.
so I can, and, yeah.
Just something else to look at.
You can do it pretty.
That one, so what I'll do is I'll just add it here with a weighting, and I think I'm just gonna do probably ones and twos.
Yeah, I'd just do ones and twos.
So if it's support, ones and twos for, positive and then negative. Because the way that I use this is I look at what has the higher positive number,
Right.
right? And then that, that usually, all right, I'm gonna look at these 3 or 2, whatever you wanna talk about, and go from there. All right. Back to, so the only thing, we did all of that. Is there any school board updates?
This is not really a school board update, and the superintendent's gone now, but I think the superintendent looked into this, but I also spoke with Kyle Barker, who called to give me an update on state aid. And so I did present at the last school board meeting that he was going to be meeting with Amy Clark because there was the new rules are now in effect for state aid. And so he was, we're on a list and he was trying to figure out what has to happen with to stay on the list and whatnot. So there's actually some really good news, which is because, we're not able to put something on a warrant article for this year, obviously. And so the good news was that once we are offered state aid, we have 30 months to pass a project. So, which is great because that gives us enough time to know, like, if we're gonna put something in front of the voters, we can actually say, we actually are awarded state aid for this project, not as opposed to last time, which was like, well, if we got state aid, this would be, right.
When do they make awards?
So the awards are made in November or December.
We have to submit a letter by May.
We have to submit a letter by May, so this is the one thing that's a little tricky, that we should give some thought to. By May, we have to submit a letter indicating that we wish to stay on the list, but also that's our opportunity to provide updated costs, and the updated costs dictate how much you're offered. So we really should be trying to update our costs. I don't know what that actually looks like.
Do you have to submit like a project plan?
No,
Just costs?
just updated costs, yeah.
It doesn't have to say what you're gonna spend money on.
Correct, and so where we're at right now,
Well, it has to comply with what the state aid application was submitted for.
correct, yes, so here's the thing, right?
So it has to be based off our original application.
It has to be based off, so as it stands right now, our ranking is based off of a new school. In order for us to change that, we would have to reapply, which would mean that we would get re-ranked. So we would drop pretty drastically because of the other towns that have come into play after our application was made.
Can we submit 2 apps?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. We can find out though.
You don't have to do a
I don't
$44
think so.
million school, though.
No, it just has to be, we've submitted for a new school, so it just has to be a new school. It doesn't, it has to be a cost-based.
I'm not sure it has to be a new school, I think it has to.
It does.
It has to address all the concerns.
If we were to do a renovation, my understanding is if we were to do a renovation,
It
we
says
would
new
have to do
school in it.
yeah, we would have to do a new application.
Yeah.
The application says new school.
Okay.
And so I think, so we don't, that may not be, we may find from this, like when we actually digest this, that that's not the right option, and in which case we would scrap that, but until we know definitively that that's not something we're gonna pursue, I think it does make sense to try to preserve that priority.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't cost us anything to do that.
Right, and so.
You don't have to accept it, right? Like
You don't have to accept
say
it.
no.
You don't have to accept it, and actually, but you have to accept it all in 1 year. So an interesting point that was brought up was that Concord has some really big projects on the docket. And we originally were of the mindset that Concord would probably accept it if they were offered it. But there was some stuff that went down in Concord. I guess there was something that was passed that they can't relocate a school per the vote. And then also their project may be too costly that they wouldn't want to accept if the amount awarded was below what they needed because they can only accept it once.
Concord would get, the last ranking was Concord would get all the money and nobody. would get
Correct,
anything.
but I think that the problem was that what may be awarded would be lower than what they would need, so they wouldn't want to accept that because if they accepted that, they couldn't go back and get more, is my understanding.
Concord is unique too, because they're an independent school district.
Right.
And they don't need voter approval to spend money. They can just say, we want a new school.
Yeah, but what happens
Here's $100
though,
million on your tax bill.
but Peter, my
They're the
understanding.
only one in the state.
But my understanding of what happened though is that their voters came and said, they passed something that said, well, you can't move the school to another site. And I think that really put a problem for their project. So the point being that if Concord did not accept, there's a good chance that Litchfield could actually get offered the money. So we'll see. I mean, all we have to do to find that out is just issue the letter saying we do want to stay on the list and give updated costs. So that's something that we'll have to kind of figure out by
A
April.
lot of chips to fall before. that.
Yeah, I mean, so how do we go about figuring that out then?
Figuring out the
The
updated
new
costs.
costs, because right, because
Yeah, that's a conversation.
here, this is repair costs.
So that's a conversation that we have to, I think what needs to happen, that's, what is that, April, May, right? So I think what needs to happen first is we need to digest this information and figure out, once we have this, okay, what's the next step? What are we gonna do from here? Are we putting out a whole new RFP? Or, ultimately, if we have, I would imagine we're gonna have at least 2 or 3 options that we need to take a look at on this. I can't tell from the pie charts, but I'm hoping that if we look at things in numbers, it might make more sense to me. But if we have 2 to 3 options, we do need to figure out, how far into exploring each option are we going? And that, I don't know, that's up to the committee.
Didn't Carl Barker on his last presentation to us give us a significantly reduced new school money?
So,
32 million,
Yeah.
yeah,
but that had no contingency in it.
yeah, so I mean, we would
Could use those
ultimately,
numbers?
yeah, so,
It's 40 million.
If we have to go, if we go new school, I think we have to go out to bid again.
yeah, so what,
That contract was closed, so it's gonna have to go out to bid.
right, yeah, so what Kyle also indicated was that we would need to get to a place where we basically put a warrant out for the voters to vote on something like $500,000 to do the pre-bond work to actually get a guaranteed maximum price for a project. So we have to, before that, we have to really figure out how are we vetting these different options? Because I don't know that you can do that for 3 different options, obviously.
Right. Yeah,
I see
that's
Ron
like
wincing though, so he
one-
may have something
Yeah,
to
I mean,
say.
$1.5
I
million.
went to that too, like, I have a hard time putting $500,000 on a warrant article to just
Well,
come up with a number. That seems like a lot.
Well, here's the rationale for that, and this is what is somewhat, and the reason I winced is the same architect recommended we go forward without doing that last year. That's actually the appropriate way to do the project. And we were ready to go forward on a project last year that had no design work done on it at all. And we could have got ourselves into a mess, and I'm quite sure we would have in hindsight. Because where it's proposed is the worst site you could pick. You stand in the ball field out there, there's water in the ball field, that's where this is gonna go,
well, part of the,
among other things.
part of that pre-bond work would be the civil engineering to
Well,
evaluate the site.
and you,
But my only question is like,
you need to go back and look at the whole,
we need to decide the direction.
Absolutely,
before doing
that's
that,
before,
right? Like,
absolutely.
If we're not gonna move forward with new
Right.
school, like, I don't, even to
Well, no,
stay
no,
on the list, I don't wanna.
No, but even if you were gonna do a renovation and an addition, you would still need to do that pre-bond work. We just have to
Right,
figure out
right.
what we're gonna be putting
Right.
out
On that.
for
So,
pre-bond work.
so.
That
the-
work is different depending on what option we're.
Correct.
Right, choosing though.
Correct.
What Matt is suggesting, right, is get a warrant article to say, we need 500,000 to go out and say, whatever option we pick.
Not this year, by the way.
Not this
I'm
year.
not recommending this for this year.
But it would be, this is call it a fund for us to say, whatever option is picked, here's your pre-bond survey work or your design plan work, right? So it's funded, it's ready to go, it's on the docket, and it's already been voted on and approved, hopefully, in 26 now.
But if you're saying we need to do that to
Well,
get
realistically,
updated numbers, it does need to be on.
If we need that to get
You said we
updated.
need that pre-bond work to be able to get updated numbers.
Well, before we
To put on our
vote on a, no, I'm sorry, no, not to put on our application.
Oh, okay.
We-
How do you
Theoretically.
get a new number to
So
put on the application?
theoretically,
Theoretically,
what we
you-
could do,
I don't
and I
think
know
we need
Ron's not gonna probably like this,
I heard what you
what we
heard.
could do is we could ask Kyle to update the numbers, cause he's done work on it, right? So we could just ask him if he would be willing to update the numbers for the purpose of just the application.
Well,
That'd probably be the easiest, cause I have no way of figuring
can I
out
make
how
a
to
different
submit
suggestion?
the numbers, yeah.
I'll go back to what I suggested to you in July to school board. I think, in accordance with what's in the on-site insight, we actually need to go out and solicit for an engineering firm to bring them on as a consultant to advise us in all our different options. And it's what's called an on-call contract. And so they have a staff that has all the disciplines we need, all the things that we need to look at. And so if we need answers, we go out and say, okay, give us a scope to do this little piece that we need right now. And it could be a conceptual estimate, or it could be,
And you're only paying them when you ask them to do something.
you only pay when you do. That's called an on-call contract. But it needs to be a firm that has all the disciplines that we need to have looked at, whether we're doing renovation, new school, or repairs.
Or anywhere in between.
That's the way, and one of the things I was hoping to ask onsite inside folks is, do they have this
Do they provide-
report, do they have experience or, what am I calling, recommendation, so to speak, of how other school districts have gone and implement that from a implementation point of view? I tend to think, in all my experience, when I was in engineering, we had a number, we provided on-call services for states, municipalities, and that's how it was done. You went out and hired a firm, you had a broad scope of what you wanted to potentially do, and then when you needed a particular, what's it gonna cost to renovate this room? Okay? They gave you a price to do that, you agreed to it, and they went and did it.
How much is that gonna cost though? to have
Did we
one?
give you, I don't know if we covered in here, the fact that the onsite insight report will get presented, and that is something that we are gonna try to coordinate as a joint meeting with.
Yes.
Yes, we did talk about it, yeah.
Okay, I just wanna make sure, so my point being, you will be able to ask that question.
And I was, the answer to your question is, when you go out and solicit for the firms, it costs you nothing. You don't pay
How much
them,
per hour?
huh?
How much per hour?
That's what's in
roughly?
the RFP that you get back, and you can then choose your firm based on that.
What happens is you select the firm that has the qualifications of what you want. And then what you do is if you have to have something done, you negotiate with them for what it's gonna cost. And then you authorize them to go do it.
So would you say that that would look like, for example, we have some survey data to take a look at, right? And if the survey data pointed us toward
Oh.
2 or 3 options, would you say that you would kind of scope that to them and say, we need to evaluate these
Yeah.
2 or 3 options?
Yep,
Okay, gotcha.
yeah.
I mean, I like that better than the $500,000 warrant article.
Well, no, let's just be clear. I think you're misinterpreting me. That is a further step in the process. We have to get through this first part before we even think about that step.
Let me just clarify. If you remember, some of the meetings, I read the procedure in which the state says that you have to do things. And the state, to get your bond, have them accept your work. You have to get to 50% design level and the guaranteed maximum price before they'll say, yes, I'll give you the money. That's the process. So that's the key to it.
On the state aid, you mean?
On the state aid. The problem is, if we just, what we were doing previously, which turned out to be a big mistake, we didn't have anything more than sketch plans. That was about the level that we had for design, and we were ready to commit to 44 million, no more. We didn't have any guarantee. We were gonna have to spend nearly $1 million to get to where we'd come up with a million, guaranteed maximum price.
Yeah.
So if you take a step back and we hire a firm on a on-call basis that can answer us questions as they come up, as we look at each one of these particulars. In fact, to Dan's point, on-site inside numbers are estimates, and he's not going to accept them as gospel
Right.
until an engineering firm says, okay, yes. As a, for instance, on-site insight has in there for HVAC system, couple $1 million. And they had an allowance in there, which I noted, of 70 for heating and I think 70,000 for the ventilation side. I can't remember how they're broken out, but 140,000 of engineering, they said had to be done before you would know the particulars. That's what a engineering firm hired to do on-call services would do for you.
Go with that.
So it's something that I'm used to, and I agree, it's a good idea. My question is, some of those costs start approaching levels of, are we gonna have to go out for a warrant article every single time we wanna hire this firm to go get us into designing an RFP?
It depends on how you, if you're doing a warrant, it depends on how the warrant is worded.
Well, remember,
Right,
we can tap into the capital reserve for
You make it
that.
you make it a trust account, and that way it has to be used for that.
That's what the money in the capital reserve would do.
Yeah. that's-
Would
that's what
use
those
that
funds
money
are
for the engineering studies.
How much do we have in that account right now? Do you know?
Yeah, you-
like 400 to 500K is what the last number that I heard from
It's
Brian.
in there.
So you got pant loads of money to do engineering study.
You can burn through that pretty
Let
quick.
me ask this, to stay
Well,
on the
I
state
admit,
list,
but to get you
to stay
started.
on the state list, do we have to provide any numbers at all?
Yeah, we do have to give updated numbers but just for what our application's in for, so just for a new school. So I don't know that I mean, if we could get to a high level, like Ron's talking about, that'd be great, but I think at a minimum, if we could get, I mean, I know you'd like to move on from Kyle
Well,
Walker, but if we could at least get something to keep us on the list, if it came down to it.
I don't know that it's that complicated to stay on the list, I think
No, but I think the updated
You
costs.
just need to send a letter that says you want to stay.
That's not entirely true, because there's updated costs that dictate how much you get. So it's foolish to not update your costs, because one thing that Kyle had said last year was, based off of updated costs, we would have gone from somewhere from potentially $7 million to $10 million. And the last time I talked to him, he said it may be as high as $12 million based off of updated costs. So it does make sense to update the costs.
With the exception, it's still only 30% of your project.
The state aid is only 30%.
Right.
Yeah.
So
That's the
to get $12 million, you gotta have a $40
Well,
million
it's
project.
30% because of where we were on the list.
No, it's 30%. Litchfield, if you look at it, your demographics determine under the state formula how much your town would get of state aid percent of a project. Some are 50, Concord's 50%. We're 30, the low end of the scale. So we will never get more than 30 cents on a dollar.
Which is fine, but I
Which
don't
is fine.
see, I don't see any reason to not update numbers.
Oh, no, I didn't say that. I just didn't want anybody, because.
Oh, I'm not trying to promise $12 million today.
Yes, well, sometimes it comes across that. So remember, to get 12, you gotta stay 40.
That. Yeah,
So you gotta be careful about saying, we could get up to $12 million of state aid.
It's all based on the size of your project.
It all depends on the size of your project. So if you had a $30 million project, the most you'd ever get is 9.
yeah, so 32 gets us 9.6.
Yep.
So that would get us down to 23?
But the
But
32.
we were at,
you know,
7 though, so I mean, it does make sense to update the numbers, because 9.6 is more than 7.
There's no reason not to.
Yeah, well, that's just it.
Just in case anyone watching can't do math.
But the other side of it is, quite truthfully, I think the whole project needs to be reevaluated. The decision to build out here was a snap decision. I can't, in my own mind, fathom why that site out, well, no, back, we're not in the school.
That way.
Out behind the school was chosen over the site that's up on the LMS site. Because the number one rule of engineering is drainage.
No, yeah.
And then it's drainage, and then all others. The LMS project is 30 feet higher than ground level at GMS. You can drain till the cows come home, be the driest spot in the world. And yet we decided it's good to put it down there. And I'll tell you one thing that's interesting is I asked the question, how are you actually going to drain that? Literally. And the answer was open retention ponds. Now, if anybody knows how retention pond works, they are put in to meter outflow into a culvert system, so that you don't have water collected from a large area and have it all head down into a culvert that can't handle it and it floods. That's what a retention ponds are, so that it meters out.
Down at Mel's, there's across the street, there's an example of that.
Right. However, retention pond works on gravity. The ball field is low in the culvert.
That's not gonna work.
Exactly. So I never understood how we were gonna drain that site other than to pump it.
Well, that's why we will need civil engineering, so I don't
Exactly.
think we have to solve that problem right now.
My point being is,
So,
if we're really gonna, consider a new school, we need to have somebody take a complete new look.
Well,
Well, before we even get to that point.
The other
we have-
options need to look, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, we don't know, we need to just see what this data says.
Easy.
You know, I don't know I mean, maybe someone else was able to decipher, I'm not able to decipher that just looking at a pie chart,
I've been looking at it a lot longer than,
Yeah.
than everybody, but.
So, I mean, I wanna look and see.
That, the insight in this, like, I think we can get to a fairly clear direction, but I like the idea of having
Well, 100% we need more.
that.
So,
Joe,
And getting different firms to
yeah,
get in
and
pick
selecting
one.
a firm, right?
selecting a firm for
Selecting a firm to.
on-call contract.
Yeah.
So and to Ron's point, right, no matter, I don't care which direction we go, we gotta analyze it, right? Because as much as that site may not be optimal, there are ways to deal with it, it's gonna cost a ton.
I do think one thing that, you know, I can definitively say, having worked on this, unless someone in here has some landowner in town that owns a wonderful piece of land that they are aware that they wanna sell to a school, right? We know that, I know that they looked at, I think, 12 or 15 different parcels. There's no one that's willing to part with land for a school that has come forward or that we've been able to communicate with. So I do think, for better or worse, that we are stuck with what we own for property, and we do have to figure out something on.
I got two points. One's a question about the school board's expectation of our recommendation. Are they expecting the high-level direction of an option where they're then gonna go solicit firms to do that engineering? Or are they asking us to do that first before we make our recommendation?
No, the school board will have to action that, but I think that what the school board wants at our next meeting, is that next week? That's next week, so I guess
Yeah.
they would like to see the data from the survey, because they're dying to know what people have responded.
I hope they're watching.
Yeah, sure.
So I think this is where, Joe, if you wanted to take this and create a presentation based upon the agreed addresses that we just came up with, to say, here's what the data says, here's what the FIC agrees that should be included in that, and then create that, right? So we meet on the 17th, which is the day before the school board. So then we would have.
Oh, that's right.
So we would have the ability to, you know, high level review it, make sure everyone's in agreement that we're okay with what it says, and then it would be, you know, theoretically, we could live edit and combine with Dan's stuff. It should be ready for the 18th.
Can I ask a bad question? With all the work we're doing, will the school board actually just take a recommendation, or are they going to look at all the data themselves and come up with,
I mean, I would,
consider our recommendation, but come up with their own?
well, this
Anything is possible.
is an advisory committee, so like, that's not binding on the school board. I would think that unless there's some major disagreement with our analysis, which I would be surprised about, because this is a large group of people that are agreeing on something, I would think that the school board will likely, probably.
And honestly, I think there'll probably be two options.
I agree. I
And the
think it's
presentation,
probably,
like, let's be clear on the presentation too, especially if we're planning this for next week, the presentation is just gonna be to share the data, it's not gonna have
Yeah.
any FIC
Yeah.
recommendation along with
no,
it.
Correct, yeah, no, this is.
I don't think the school board's
data-
looking for a recommendation for,
So, back to my point, our recommendation then
Tina was.
is gonna be,
I don't think the majority of the school board is looking for a recommendation.
we need to pick a direction based off our data, and in our recommendation, it's gonna say, get some firms to get better numbers, and like, that's what our recommendation is. We're not gonna come to them with, here's our recommendation for this renovation that's gonna cost $14 million.
No, right, then,
I would see it stepped. I think at this point, the recommendation is we see the need to study a number of options, and we need engineering data to look at that. We recommend that the school board go out and get a engineering firm, hire them on an on-call basis, of which to provide support to us for further study.
Right,
That's a recommendation.
Yeah.
that's what I want to make clear.
And I
like,
think the number of options really just depends on when we look at the data, how close,
And how many of them
you know,
we choose.
right.
correct.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, we don't,
Love to narrow it down to like one or two.
Let me ask a question. Is there any consensus about, what does people think about having a firm hired on an on-call basis?
I don't think you have enough of us here right now to even make that decision.
And I don't know.
Well,
that
but I mean, if you're asking, but I think he's asking, I think he's
Yeah.
asking of the people that are here, what is the general
I
feedback?
mean, I would, that sounds like the right move to
Yeah.
me.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, I just hope we can do this in a way that we don't get caught up of where.
I don't wanna keep spending money on
Right.
analysis and reports, right?
Right.
Like, I want it to drive towards a final solution.
So where I was trying to go is, I don't wanna get caught up of where we're gonna get backlash from the budget committee or selectmen or, the town to say, no, that has to go to warrant article, even though we got capital funds or anything else, that has to go to warrant article to go get approved to do it. If we're gonna do this, I think it needs to be done in such a way of, if we've got funds available, then we get to spend it doing this, and if not, then sure, we'll go raise funds via warrant.
Well, let me just, if I understand correctly, you can use the funds that you have, you just simply need to hold a hearing to take money out of the trust, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, so you have money, you have control of it. So there's no additional.
But we do have also
There's
the,
other,
There's a ton of
Oh,
other
oh,
stuff.
but
like-
remember-
We gotta make sure
Yeah, I
we spend it
understand.
responsibly, like, that's why we gotta narrow this down,
Exactly.
using all of our data.
But at the
to-
moment, we're not asking for $500,000 to begin with.
Right.
If you remember, I
I
suggested.
don't know what we're actually.
No,
I don't know how much an on-call service
I said
costs.
the first, it doesn't cost you a cent.
Well, eventually it does when I ask them to do something.
Yes,
they
it
charge the kind of
does.
material when they come over.
Yeah.
As a for instance,
So it's an hourly
I agree
material.
that the general number to look at the school to determine HVAC system and boiler rehab and general first repairs would probably be in the order of $150,000, and that's what Onsite Insight said. I think that's probably the target I would expect.
Right.
So that's clearly within the $500,000 that they've available.
But you're saying that to repair, I'm talking, what is the average cost of the on-call person when I ask them to come out and do a design or engineering?
It's gonna be.
What's the
firm
average
by-
hourly rate,
it-
$150, $200?
Yes,
Yeah, I would say it's gonna
It's
be.
probably around
every bit of that,
$100.
If not more.
average cost with overheads from junior to senior level, the average today might be around $100 with overhead.
What I would also just wanna try to, understand is like, I was in, like, I participated, I wasn't on the board or in the FIC, but I participated when we did reimagining GMS, which did start, I wanna make sure that we're getting something either more comprehensive or different, or that somehow, I just wanna make sure I understand like what we're getting when we do it. Obviously, that's gonna be based off of what we ask for.
You mean, well, yeah,
We would have to write a
Didn't get us anywhere.
so essentially, we would have to write a statement of work for what we expect.
the range
For
of work.
every single time that we ask the firm to do something.
Right.
Well, you do two things. First of all, what you do is you do an overall qualifications requirements for the range of services you expect and need to have them do. So firms can then propose, and you select firms to propose to you, and you pick one of those. You haven't spent a cent yet.
Right. No, I get that part of
And
it.
once you select one,
My question was more design, like, when I ask them to do something, what is this gonna cost me?
Right.
Are we talking 1,000 or
well, it's the
100,000?
same thing as when you go into your car. Take a car in the garage.
But I guess that, the reason why that is a good question though, is that, I mean, there's no way we can get another warrant article, but if it was something that needed to be a warrant article, like that would have been, something we would have needed.
Well, remember.
But every dollar we spend takes away from the money we have for repairs.
No. The reason being is we have no idea how to progress on what Onsite Insight has here.
Well, we have no idea how to progress on anything, because we,
Even if we had $5 million, I couldn't tell you how to move forward with that until it gets engineered.
Right, so
That's
I
the
guess
point.
what Denise is driving at is, if the 25-year-old furnace at CHS bites the dust, and we go use all of the funds in the capital improvement to go do engineering, then we have nothing to
Right.
go replace the furnace with.
Right.
So, I think that's gonna be the school board look at, how much of that do we want to divest to do the engineering work?
Well, my perception is the engineering work has to be done to help us decide what to do. What to do is going to be a warrant article. The what to do will be a warrant article.
So, and I agree with you, but it's still
costs.
it still costs to
a
get the
nebulous
engineers.
cost.
And the real question that I have is, right, is, looking at the on-site insight report, heating system at CHS is 25 years old, right? They said it's relatively end of life. So it's serviceable, it's working, but it's relatively good working order end of life. So the question is, and again, this goes back to the school board, do they want to take the risk, go spend 250 grand to go to get engineering services, which I think it's a reasonable number of what's in there comparatively, or do they want to save it for emergency repairs when they crop up on CHS or GMS? But again, that's a school board decision to go look at and do. So.
We technically have two different trust funds, but
Okay.
Can I
So-
just mention my other point before we move on to something else? You had mentioned the land piece of it. In one of the comments, you'll see someone made an interesting suggestion that I don't know if it's even possible. But could we petition the state for a piece of the state land?
The state forest?
So that
That's been
was-
talked about a little bit.
that was a conversation that was talked about, and it didn't, with the state, and my understanding is it didn't go anywhere. But yes, that was actually one of, so there was a site over behind the soccer fields over there, I forget what they're called.
Sawmill?
Where your pickleball is. That was the original site that we were in talks with. They decided not to sell, then they went over and started talking to the state. The state was not, it didn't go anywhere.
Interesting.
Then the conversation happened across here, so.
Do we
There's
have
there's land behind the high school that I think is owned by
there's-
Hudson, but they didn't want
They don't
to.
sell either. No, Hudson owns
Hudson
a bunch
owns
of
the-
land
oh,
where
yes.
their old wells used to be.
Right.
They didn't want to.
That was that whole
they didn't wanna offload
Dara
that.
pond, it was that whole well thing from like 2011.
The one thing I can say pretty confidently is that there was a lot of investigation into other sites, and it's just not seeming likely. There's just not a lot of sites that are suitable that anyone's willing to.
That's not pulling water out of those wells.
Without getting too far afield, remember, there was a proposal presented to the school board and designed by Harriman in 2006 to build it on the LMS
We're in
property.
LMS.
Huh?
On the hill, so part of,
Where
so,
the,
and I know Ron's gonna disagree with this, and he's gonna say that there's more
No,
water at the bottom,
Where
but
in LMS were they talking about putting it?
in
in between the
the
two schools?
woods.
In the woods.
Look at
Between the two
LMS,
schools?
like right off.
Where
the-
the-
It was gonna require,
In between,
right, it was gonna require extensive road work to get up there. I think that there was potential egress issues and potential water issues when they reevaluated that.
In the Harriman design, they just used the same entrance that LMS had. There was no secondary exit. We actually,
there's
remember,
gonna be another exit there. There is an exit, but it's
There
not in
is.
that neighborhood.
but it's the second exit. It exists. And it
So-
all needs to be
But
for
now you're packing
energy.
two schools. Yeah.
I don't remember that one.
So we can look at that, but it's 7:25, so I want to go through recap and action items. So, the on-site insight, I encourage everybody to go in, read the 3 reports. Since we're focusing on GMS, I highly suggest we put effort on GMS. With that, the survey, I am going to add that last data point. I am going to send out this data file, make sure that slicer field selector thingy, Excel calls it a slicer, works for all of the graphs and goes from there. And I encourage everybody to come back and with their insights as to what the data says to them. I will add the weighting to it. So then that way it's, again, it just breaks it down to numerical. Percentages also work, but it's just easier if you're gonna look at a whole bunch of data, look at a
Can you do
weighted.
the pie charts too with the weighted?
yeah, he's gonna keep both.
Well, I'm gonna keep,
Can you
yeah,
keep them, is that what you said?
Keep the pie charts with
Oh
the
yeah,
weighted.
we're not gonna delete any of that.
yeah, no.
We're just adding more ways to look at it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I'm not gonna get rid of the pie charts.
No, I just want pie charts of the weighted results rather than,
Well, they are weighted because they're percentages.
Yeah, and so it's all percentage of the
Oh, you
number.
want,
I like the
want-
little color pie charts.
Yeah.
I
Visually,
think it's gonna
easy to look at.
be a thing that says, okay, on this pie chart equals 12 points for this thing.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
what it'll just give you a number.
Yeah.
That's saying, okay, if you added up, if there was 100 strongly disagree, you have a negative 200, and then if there was 100 disagree, it's, it was 2 points, it was negative 400, and then it was
Right.
negative 100. So you add those together, you get a number.
it's 10 points positive,
Okay.
or 10
Correct.
points negative.
Correct. It's a singular numeric value as to what that graph says. It's a way to look at it.
I like the percentages too, I like the pie chart too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's, again, it's just a different way. Going back, looking at my notes, that's the agenda.
I think it's gonna change the results no matter what.
Yeah, essentially.
It's gonna be, it's gonna be that close on all, on almost all of those.
So to recap, Dan Mitchell is looking at what do we do with the paper copies of the survey. I think once we all agree as to what the data says in there in the Google Forms versus all the paper copies and it was copied correctly, then my opinion is just shred them. Or if someone has a good fire pit, that works as well. We talked with, we talked about Ron, so Ron agreed that, yes, we talked about Ron.
We talked about Ron.
So Ron's motion on the, going over his immediate things we can do, we said that we're gonna bring up in the first scheduled meeting of January. I already have a request out to John Brunel to schedule out like the next 6 months of worth of meetings to get us through the first half of '25. So then that way, we've got dates, locations up front scheduled. Hopefully we can beat out other people. And question back to Barker and Amy Clark, can we submit 2 applications for 2 different styles of projects? One for renovation, one for state aid, or one for a new
I
school?
think we should have Brian reach out to the state and get that answer, and not have it go through Kyle.
Brian can
Yes.
ask.
Yes. All right, that's what I was gonna say.
It would probably be not allowed, because otherwise you'd have 2 different rankings.
Yeah, so the only reason why I would say it in my argument playing Jen's devil advocate is, what if I can only get one of them approved, right? We can get higher ranking with a higher state aid, but if, we get the lower burden on the town approved, then we've got some state aid and a ranking for it, right? So, whatever.
We know where
Can
we
you,
stand.
can you
either
add
way.
that he just talks about the if we're gonna, the option of putting that second application in, like, if it was for a renovation
Right.
or something?
Yeah, I have
Where
that.
would we end up potentially on that list, and for how much potentially? Cause like, I think that could weigh on the decision, right? Like, if you're not gonna get any state aid for the project, that,
It definitely depends on how many deficiencies you solve.
right, that's what I'm saying, but
Yep.
like, that weighs on our decision, right? Like, if we propose a $20 million project and don't get any state aid,
Right.
or a $32 million project and get 9 million state aid and it's a $23 million project,
Right.
that changes your decision-making a little bit.
Yep,
Or at least it's a factor to consider.
Right.
yep.
Yeah.
So, is there anything that I am missing from a recap? And I kind of went through, I think, all the
I'm
action
prepping
items
the
around me.
presentation for the school board.
Yes. Action item. Joe, make presentation.
It's not gonna be super fancy, like,
We don't need to. We don't need fancy.
gonna be
They just want to know
PowerPoint.
what the data is.
it's gonna be a PowerPoint with some charts on it.
Yeah, they just want to know what the data is. So.
Are they gonna have the raw data beforehand?
We probably should send it, once this group has looked at it, we probably should send
Why
it.
don't you send, when you send it out to us, send it to the school board too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
you
raw
just add
data.
school board.
I don't know if I have all their addresses.
It's
but
literally just school
School
board at.
Litchfield.
Well, doesn't it go to school board if it goes to you
Let's try
too?
last date.
No.
No. If you email to just me, it just goes to me. But if you email to school board at Litchfield, that's the.
Oh, I was under the impression, if it,
Oh, so you thought you were bothering all of us, not just me?
well, somebody told me, but yes, I was hoping I
If you
was,
do the school board, everybody on the school board.
okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, school
Including
board.
Brian and,
Are you saying send
The
that
VA.
now?
Well, when you guys, I think when we update when you add the other data points in.
Right, add
You can
the
just,
one singular
and you
data
send it out,
point.
the other data
It'll
point.
be a
Yeah.
more effective meeting if they have the information ahead of time, I would assume.
Yep, no, I tend to agree, but it's, again, right, is, the difference is, here's the raw data, everyone go look at it, but Joe's gonna go look at, here's our agreed upon address types,
Yeah.
and, here's what the graph says, again, just
This
presentation
is
of
what
the
we
data,
think,
what
right.
the FIC agreed upon.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's.
Everybody good?
Yep.
Motion to close?
so moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, good evening, everybody, see you later.
Good night.